When it comes to retro motorcycle, one brand has dominated proceedings, and that is Royal Enfield. And among Royal Enfield motorcycle, one bike has been the king of the segment, and that's the Classic 350. Ever since its debut, it's the king of the segment and has kind of created this retro roadster segment. Over the past few years, many brands have tried to eat into Royal Enfield's market share. And the latest entrant is from India's largest two-wheeler manufacturer, Hero MotoCorp, with the Mavrick 440.
So Hero wanted to make a statement. We wanted to enter the retro motorcycling space with this Mavrick. So this is the first bike from Hero on the joint Harley-Davidson platform. It shares most of its foundations with the X440, but the Mavrick stays true. So Hero wanted to make a bike that is accessible as well as affordable and yet aspirational for the brand. And in that sense, this Mavrick costs the same as the Classic.
Yeah, so let's find out if the Mavrick can take on the Top Gun of this segment. So Jan, let's start this comparison with performance, and in terms of the engine, both of these motorcycles have taken a very torque heavy approach.
Yeah, both are long stroke configurations. Obviously the Hero Mavrick has a larger displacement, 440cc, 349cc, and that sort of reflects in the output numbers as well, right? This is making around 9 Nm more torque than the Classic 350.
Yeah.
And in that sense, this feels the more alive, the more lively motorcycle of the two. Neither of these can be termed as quick, but yeah, this definitely reaches the, say, cruising speeds or higher speeds faster than the Classic.
Exactly. The Mavrick, I think, is easily quicker off the line. It has the better acceleration. Even in in-gear acceleration, the Mavrick was clearly faster. But in terms of cruising speed, I think for the Classic 350, it's around 90 to 95 kph. It just feels in its zone. And for the Mavrick, it's around 100 to 105 kph. So on that sense, in terms of the cruising speed, it has a slight advantage.
Slight advantage, but what I find a little bit surprising is that this has the same Harley-Davidson engine.
Yes.
Right? And 2 Nm less shouldn't make that much of a difference. Say it doesn't make towards the lower half, but at the top, I remember the Harley-Davidson X440 to pull, it goes to 120, 130 kmph, whereas this, after 110, it sort of plateaus. Whereas this, yes, 95 is Zen mode, but it can still go 100, 110, and that's also the plateau. So technically the ceiling for both of these motorcycles is sort of similar.
Yeah, kind of. Like the Mavrick easily has the better top end speed, but it takes its own speed time. Same thing with the Classic 350 also takes its own speed time. But in terms of the feel, when you're doing that 90-95 kph, the Classic 350 just feels so much better. It just feels much more stable doing those speeds. The Mavrick does that speed, but somehow it doesn't feel that it's calm.
So both of the motorcycles have the same wheelbase, right? And the feeling of the stability is primarily arising from the larger wheels of the Classic. So in that sense, it's planted, it's zen, and you got to give Royal Enfield credit because they've been making that bike for God knows how many years now. And that sense of connect, that sense of being one together with the motorcycle is far more prominent. And that's where the Mavrick just feels a little jittery, a little too sharp for it to be a retro roadster.
Exactly. When you're changing some lanes, it just feels a bit jittery. So in terms of cruising speed, the Mavrick clearly has the better top end speed in that sense. The Classic has the lower speed, but the feel of that engine, it just feels much more better. And the same engine nature helps through in the city as well. Very low end torque heavy. So when you are riding both these motorcycles in the city, you can easily chug in third gear. There is no lugging, there's no knocking. Both these motorcycles feel very easy to ride in the city.
And what helps the Hero in this case is that the clutch action is a little light. Both gearboxes are very nice, but I think that the shift quality or the slickness is better over there. But in that sense, again, like we mentioned, roll on acceleration. So just roll on the throttle and the Mavrick pulls away. The Classic takes its own sweet time, and that's sort of becoming an identity of both these motorcycles. Whereas that likes to take a lazy, retro approach, whereas this is retro but wants to be a little spirited.
Little sporty in that sense. Yeah, exactly. I think the clutch action of the Classic 350, again, it's very heavy, so it kind of becomes a bit tiresome when you are riding it in stop and go traffic. On the Mavrick, just feels very easy. Again, both these motorcycles, because of the great bottom end torque, are very good commuters in that sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of highway, I think the Classic has that edge at stability wise,
Yeah.
but the Maverick has that edge in terms of the sportiness. So even though they're very similar,
Yeah.
you can easily identify which kind of rider they are focusing on.
And that's sort of also when you say both of them are similar fuel tanks, 13.5, 13 liters, but the smaller displacement and say well-balanced nature of
Yeah.
the Classic helps it generate a little bit more fuel efficiency. So we've been receiving somewhere between 28 and 32 on the
Yeah,
Classic.
in terms of
And
real world fuel efficiency.
Real world, realistic, worst fuel efficiency that sort of you can experience. Whereas on the Maverick it's lower, it's like around 25 to 28.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So even though it has 1 gear extra,
Yeah.
the fuel efficiency wise, I think the Classic has the edge both in the city as well as the highway. So in terms
Yeah.
of touring, in terms of range,
Yeah.
the Classic will have slightly longer legs. So let's go to the next segment.
Now again, when it comes to similarities on paper, both of them have the same seat height, both of them have the same ground clearance, both of them have nearly the same wheelbase. But when you sit on the motorcycles, two of them feel very different. That is a typical old school upright retro roadster, whereas this is a roadster but also a street bike and also a commuter.
Yeah, the riding posture of the Maverick kind of reminds me of the Gixxer 250 and the FZ25 to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yes, the foot pegs aren't that rear set, but you just feel a bit slightly sportier. The Classic 350 is like a typical roadster. You just sit very relaxed on this motorcycle, the nice flat wide handlebar, the shape of the fuel tank, your legs are spread apart, you just get a nice commanding view. So in terms of the riding posture, I think the Classic is slightly more tilting towards the typical roadster, and that's why I think it's slightly more comfier.
Yeah.
And talking about comfort, what's your take on the seats of the bikes?
I think both of the motorcycles have fairly good seats. Like we've experienced the Classic over a long term and found that the seat you start to sink in and starts hurting over time. You can get the touring seat and it becomes better.
Yeah.
Even this I expect is the similar
Same thing.
feeling. So you might need to think about aftermarket solutions if you're planning to go proper touring and all that. But in that sense, while seating wise both of them are same, I think pillion space might be just better on the Classic
Yeah.
because it's a separate seat as well as it's a much more spaced out area.
Yeah,
Right?
so I think the Classic 350 in our sense is one of the best, most comfier seats for a pillion rider. And talking about the seat cushioning of both this motorcycle, I think you can do around say 300 kilometers in comfort, post which it might get slightly uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But then again, in terms of touring, both these motorcycles are pretty comfy in terms of the ergonomics. So on paper, the Maverick is 8 kgs lighter than the
Yeah.
Classic 350. But in reality, the Classic kind of feels like 20-30 kgs heavier, especially when you're moving this motorcycle around parking. It is
Slow
it
speed.
feels hefty.
And I think again that's down to the wheels, right? Larger wheels contribute to that feeling of being heavy to push around, to
Yeah.
pull around. Whereas 17 inches, again, easy to just, while we are taking U-turns also, very easy, very nimble, and you didn't need to put your feet down, it made
Yeah.
the U-turn
Yeah.
very quickly. Whereas there you have to plan, prepare, and arab say, take the U-turn. Yeah?
Yeah.
But again, if you look at it from a comfort angle and you've introduced that, the suspension on the Maverick, it feels very sorted in that sense. That might feel a bit mushy,
Yeah.
a little soft, wallowy, and that might unsettle the bike, but this remains flat. It might not feel as soft or as bouncy as such. So on slow, small rides, this might feel a little more taut.
Yeah.
But over the course of the period, you'll find that this remains well settled and you will enjoy this experience slightly better.
Exactly. Like the Classic 350 suspension. It's not a bad suspension
Yeah.
in any term, but I think just the way the Hero engineers have tuned the suspension on the Maverick, it is just very good over bumps, over broken roads. So if in your commute, you're going to encounter a lot of rough roads, the Maverick will clearly offer you a comfortable ride.
Yeah.
And in terms of talking about commuting, in city riding, again the Maverick has the edge because the smaller wheels feel so much more agile and nimbler. And going through traffic is so much fun on that bike.
Yeah, better leverage, you can easily move through traffic, whereas again that is the lazy, relaxed version of the Classic which comes out. And the same feeling is there when you are starting to push in the bends, or you take it out into the twisties, or you just encounter some good cornering roads on your tours where the Classic wants you to remain calm, remain chilled. Whereas this, let's say that this wants you to push, but there is a limiting factor, and that is
the tires. And the tires kind of hold you back because the chassis has a lot of play. Like, it wants you to push hard. It is very communicative. But then the tires, they rob you of confidence and you just feel a bit jittery. But then again, that's an easy fix because these are 17-inch wheels, so you will have a lot of aftermarket options. On the Classic 350, it's all about going aram se, going very chill. And also the foot pegs get grounded easily, so you know the limit. Well, that's not the case on the Maverick. So
we're not saying that the Classic has good tires. The Classic also has some really weird and not grippy tires. But on that bike, you're not pushing the bike, so the limit of the potential of the chassis, you're not finding that.
Exactly.
But this is sort of encouraging you, and then it holds you back.
Yeah. So,
but one good thing about the Maverick is that the brakes are far better here, right?
Clearly.
Stopping performance is better, bite is there, feedback could have been a little more. It feels a little vague over there. But when you wanted to stop, it stops.
Yeah, exactly. The lever, I felt, has been tuned a bit soft on the Maverick, the brakes. But the Classic, it just feels wooden. There is no kind of feedback. You have no idea when the brakes are working, what kind of activity is happening on the front end.
In fact, that is one of the only few bikes which I have to use the rear brake always.
Exactly. And I think it's also down to the levers of the Classic. Those thick levers, they don't give you too much feedback and feel. And in terms of bite also, the Classic 350 kind of lags behind the Maverick. The only good aspect of the Classic 350 is the calibration of the ABS. I think the ABS calibration on the Royal Enfield is better than the Maverick. The Maverick somehow just feels a bit odd, especially when you're going over speed breakers.
Yeah, it just triggers like this, and then there's a lot of tire squeal, right? So that might sort of make you feel like what is going on, but nothing to worry about over there. So that's where these two bikes stand. Yes, this is definitely a more peppy, alive, sportier motorcycle of the two.
But surprisingly, it's also more comfier.
Correct.
In that sense.
Correct.
Even though it's sporty, it's feels much more younger, you say.
Yeah.
But you feel that the Classic 350 will offer you a better ride quality, but that's not the case. Even the suspension tuning of the Maverick is good. So in terms of comfort and in terms of fast cornering and commuting in the city, I think the Maverick has the edge over the Classic. And again, the DNA of these two motorcycles are coming through. This just feels younger at heart. This just feels much more relaxed and mature in that sense.
But then we move on to the area where the Maverick is very confused and the Classic is very well defined.
Yeah, and that's styling. And in terms of styling, again, styling is a personal preference. But the Classic 350, come on, look at it. It is the template of a pure retro roadster, and it looks fantastic, especially in this chrome.
That silhouette hasn't changed one bit, right? Yeah. And then you mentioned the colors, like the chrome is brilliant, but also the other halcyon green, or even for that matter, the darker shades with the alloy wheels, which offer more convenience. Yes, alloys might not look that great, but they offer great convenience. Whereas on the Maverick, we've got the top end version, and you only get either a black or a black. And it sort of robs you of the attractiveness or draw towards the bike. More so, I feel it's a little confused. Whether it's a roadster, a retro bike, a street bike, a cruiser, or what exactly is it?
Yeah, I mean, you can see a lot of elements of different motorcycles. The headlight is kind of similar to the CB300, the fuel tank a bit similar to the FZS or the X. So it's here and there. Then again, this motorcycle is based on the X440. So Hero designers didn't have much kind of freedom to work around. But the styling, okay, what we can say for one factor is that it is more modern and sporty in its approach. The Classic is a pure Classic. The styling of the Maverick, not too great. My other concern of this motorcycle, or more of a concern or more of an issue, is the way it looks. Like in terms of dimension, although the same wheelbase and everything, the Maverick looks very small in terms of the appearance. It doesn't look like a 450cc motorcycle.
Yeah, that is the case. And again, the colors are not doing any justice here. If you were to get one, we suggest get the middle variant because that has either a blue or a red option, which looks more inviting, right?
It pops out
just,
a bit.
Just makes the bike stand out from the rest.
And for Royal Enfield too, you have a plethora of options to go through.
But the features on paper, again, the Hero has
the edge,
connectivity, digital display, whatnot.
Gear position indicator, range.
Is it actually becoming useful? Because I, for one, find that screen very cluttered and useless.
I mean, it's a negative LCD screen. It's not particularly visible under direct sunlight. Also, the screen size is very small. Like on the Harley, you have a TFT, it's much more brighter, much more legitimate in that sense. On the Classic 350, things are very simple. You have just a proper analog speedometer. There is no tachometer. So in terms of features, the Mavrick has the advantage. But in terms of useful features, how you're using it, it kind of takes a
like hit. Even though this has turn-by-turn navigation, but the tripper pod on that works so much better, right? Okay, that tripper pod is an accessory on the rest of the variants, chrome it's standard, but still I would rather spend that 5,000 rupees more and get the tripper pod if I am buying the smaller or the other color options, because on this the arrows are very weird and it's very small to point out, whereas that is prominently displayed.
Like even when you're riding the Mavrick, you get confused between the tachometer and the fuel gauge. You have to literally focus for a few seconds and to find out, okay, we are doing this RPM. And in terms of the switch gear, again, not a big fan of the Classic's rotary switch gear. We always said that in each of our video. But then again, it still has a mode button on the handlebar, so you can see, even though the information is limited, it's easier to see.
Trip, odo, clock.
But you can see that. On the Mavrick, it's on the console. And there's a big empty space on the left-hand side.
Empty space because they've used the same switch housing from the Harley-Davidson, whereas the Harley-Davidson has a joy cube over here. They've got rid of it and the buttons are on the console. So while riding, I can't leave my throttle hand to change the console. And that means I have to come to a stop and change it around. That's a bit of a pointless. And that looks empty.
It's like a blank space on the switch gear. So we think Hero should have stuck to the same switch cube that we had seen on the Harley. Now, in terms of quality, the Royal Enfield Classic 350 with the J platform, they made a great jump in terms of quality. We have almost used this motorcycle for 3 years and you can see there are not much in terms of quality. It's still there.
That's a 4-year-old motorcycle. Think of it. If you would have looked at this bike and saw like Royal Enfield 4-year-old motorcycle, this wouldn't be the condition, considering that this is a media unit which has been harshly used and abused for that. Whereas you look at this Hero, this is what, hardly a couple of months.
Not even a couple of months, few weeks.
It's just starting to show signs of age already, like a little rusting around the edges. I know it's based in Mumbai, this one came from Mumbai, so obviously salt water is playing. But again, the crude welds, the exposed wiring, it's all a little messy right now.
Yeah, means in terms of wear and tear, I think the Classic has stood the test of time better. While the Mavrick, I think Hero needs to step up the quality levels a bit. I'm not saying it's a very badly built motorcycle, but again, in terms of sheer quality levels among these two motorcycles, clearly the Royal Enfield has the edge. So we are almost at the end of this video, and Jan, let's talk about the value proposition among these two motorcycles.
This starts from rupees 1.99 lakh ex-showroom and goes up to 2.24 lakh, if I'm not mistaken. That starts from 1.90 lakh, but that's the single channel ABS version. The dual channel ABS starts at 2.02 lakh and goes up to 225 for this chrome version. So essentially you're getting the same bike from 2.03 to 2.25, but colors are the spread there. Whereas on this, there are a lot of feature additions and stuff. But our recommendation
on the Mavrick.
Our recommendation on the Mavrick would be the mid 2.15 lakh, which has the red or the blue color. It misses out on those few connectivity features like geofencing and geotagging, but that's fine.
So for the Classic 350, we will suggest our viewers to buy the dual channel ABS variant, because the basic variant has a single channel ABS and it doesn't even get a rear disc brake. And in terms of pricing, both these motorcycles are on par. I think Hero has done a better job in that sense, because for what it is offering in terms of features, in terms of a larger capacity engine, that is offering good value. What do you think?
Yeah, but that is playing on the legacy of the brand, right? That is brand value, that is the ethos of a retro motorcycle, and Royal Enfield can be allowed to take a little bit of a leverage in that sense, right?
Yeah.
But I would still pick, say, the green color, which costs like 10-15,000 less than this, right? I can save up that money.
So in talking about that legacy, and now that's a very big aspect for a buyer in this category, because Royal Enfield is obviously one of the biggest brands out there. Hero, it is the largest two-wheeler manufacturer in the country, but it's a brand which is associated with commuter motorcycles, and now they are playing into the premium segment. So you think buyers would be willing to shell out over 2 lakh rupees for a Hero motorcycle?
My issue with Hero getting into the retro space is Hero didn't have any retro motorcycle. If you're counting the Splendor Classic, then that's not a retro motorcycle, first. Okay, so getting into the retro space, you need to educate your Hero buyers about the retro space, right? Because for say 20-30,000 rupees more, you can get the Harley-Davidson.
Exactly.
Right? And that bike has a lot more brand pull, right? Or you can get the Triumph, which is also a big name. Or obviously the Royal Enfield, because it's always set up to be the big mammoth, the giant of our country. In that sense, that is where the Hero retro proposition sort of becomes a little dicey.
But in terms of service and in terms of even selling this motorcycle, Hero would be selling through a premium dealership, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, so Hero will sell it through their new Hero premium dealerships, where they'll also sell the Extreme 4V, the X-Pulse, the Vida, and the Harley-Davidson X440. Okay. But what we've experienced so far and heard from people who own the X-Pulse and the Extreme, that their service experience at regular Hero dealerships has not been that great, because regular Hero dealerships service a lot of Splendors, Passion
flooded with all the
8-shape Deluxes. So their workload is divided onto those motorcycles primarily, and to service these takes a little bit of a back step. So hopefully that doesn't happen at the premium dealerships.
Yeah. Now let's come down to the verdict in terms of the character. Both these motorcycles are going for a very torque-heavy engine, offering that experience in terms of riding. But then again, it's very different. The Mavrick is clearly much more sporty, feels much more younger in that sense. The Classic is, again, the benchmark, feels more mature, and the riding experience is also completely different.
And what just draws me to that bike every time is the sense of connect it makes you feel, right? Like the emotions that come from riding this bike at 80 kmph on the highway or 40 kmph in the city. There is no other bike like that. Like the day I picked up this motorcycle from the dealership, I saw people zipping by, and I am a Duke 390 owner. I know I want to ride fast. Whereas on this bike, I'm like, to hell with the world. I'm riding at 40. I'm in chill zone. Whereas that sense of connect is sort of lacking here. It feels a little more mechanical that way.
Yeah. So in terms of the emotional quotient, of course, the Royal Enfield Classic 350 always scores very high. And so if you are a buyer who wants a retro motorcycle in terms of the torque heavy nature, but wants something sporty, something that looks younger, I think the Mavrick makes a good choice, because in terms of pricing, there's not much of a difference. But then again, in terms of a pure roadster, I think the Classic 350 is still the benchmark, and still a lot of players are coming into the picture, but it is clearly way above them. I particularly like one thing about the Hero Mavrick 440 is that the brand didn't take another classic roadster approach. They are offering you something very different from the others.
They didn't copy and make their version of a Royal Enfield. That is what we appreciate Hero for. Yeah, right? But still again, Classic is a classic. I just wish the 650 comes sooner.
It will come sooner, and I think it's a clear thing. If you want something sporty but something retro, go for that. If you want a pure retro, the Classic 350 is still the king of the segment.
So what do you guys think about this video? Do let us know in the comment section below. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Always wear a helmet when you're out on the ride, and follow both of us as well as Acko Drive on our Instagram page.
Thank you for watching.